Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll start to get moving. We've got about 50 people so far. I think there's a few more to come. For those who don't know me, I'm Andrew Sharman. I am the Vice President Facilities and Operations at the U of A, and I'm also the 2021 ECA Vice Chair of the Board. So welcome to everybody. We're really pleased to have a lot of people here. I've noticed we've got representatives from City of Edmonton, City of Calgary, Alberta Infrastructure, Norquest, NATE, Alberta Health Services, City of Spruce Grove, City of St. Albert. I've noticed so far. Bill Black from Calgary Construction Association, so welcome. And then a number of industry partners on top of our private developers. I think I saw Roddy Hander from Holo Block. Jeff Smith, MCW, I think is there. And I also saw Trevor Doucette from Graham. So welcome to everybody. It's our first meeting of 2021. Unfortunately, still remote. We had, about 2 months ago, had some hope we might be able to get together, but obviously not with the way the infection rate is in the province at the moment. But let's hope we can move that way as we get through the rest of the year. And we'll talk about that at the end of today's meeting. I think the team have put together a really interesting agenda today. There's a number of updates, prompt pay. We've also got some updates from ACA and AUMA. And then really the latter half of the meeting, we are really lucky to have Ernst & Young join us today to talk about alternative delivery models and things we have talked about in the past. And there will be some engagement within that time as well. So very much looking forward to those and to hearing what is out there and what we can do differently, particularly as we start to pick up more projects over the coming year or so as we get out of the pandemic. But with that, I would like to invite Curtis Griffiths from BuildWorks to give us an update and set the meeting off.
Thank you, Andrew, and great to see everyone virtually, and happy to be here for a brief update from BuildWorks Canada. So a few minutes just to share some of our progress with more of our partnership and the size of BuildWorks. So a little visual year to date in the 3 provinces, the Prairie provinces, we've advertised over $3.4 billion worth of construction this year. The highest opportunity count that we've seen ever in the platform, or almost positive more than the old paper plan rooms. So the number of opportunities is high, and that's great for industry, great for contractors to find work. And then just a little bit of context of the reach that we're finding. We've had over 51,000 unique users in the platform this year from every province and territory in Canada, and as well as 35 states across the US. So I think that's important to share just for the associations for what we're trying to achieve through BuildWorks, through our partnership to grow and become bigger and just have a larger audience. And a larger audience, obviously, we're trying to expose opportunities to more people and also be at the center of all those conversations and be able to help get messaging out to industry when it's needed. So we have a very large audience that interacts with the platform quite often, which allows us to really communicate well with industry when we need to. The next slide I'll show you is just a little bit of an update. Some wouldn't know this, but our platform, BuildWorks Canada, is provided by eSolutions Group. We are now partnered in that contract with our colleagues in British Columbia, Ontario, and very recently Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick. So through that partnership, we all have different brands, but we are all working together collaboratively on the same platform, and that's 31 local construction associations across Canada, working closer together, trying to align some of our goals in sharing opportunities, and really important for that, we are working on a more cohesive partnership and branding and collaboration, really in an effort to help owners connect with contractors and obviously help contractors connect with work through our platform. So that's just a quick update on some of the work that's being done and some of the stuff behind the scenes that many folks wouldn't understand. But really excited about this opportunity to work closer with our colleagues across Canada and build out really a much larger platform that adds a ton of value for members across Canada. So that's everything from me. I'm always happy to answer any questions. So if anyone on the call has or on the meeting has questions, through the chat or reach out to me personally at any time. I'd love to chat about what we're doing, how we can help, and what we can do together. So that's everything for me, and I believe I'll pass it over maybe back to Andrew or straight over to Peter, whichever works best. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Curtis. Appreciate the update. So Peter's going to give us another update on the private sector. He gave us one, I think, last fall, which was really useful. So I'll hand the floor over to Peter.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I dive in, I think some of this talk generally leads to a bit of optimism, and I absolutely want to acknowledge the challenging times we're in, and I know that case counts are ramping up a little bit, and that's very real for a lot of folks. So if I steer towards too much optimism, it's not at the expense of marginalizing anybody's perspective on the current conditions. So that said, there is, from our perspective anyway, there is optimism in the market, cautious optimism, that is. And I thought for today, I would resurface a few metrics that we looked at, this going back to July, last time we met in person at the Westin. So looking at a few metrics that we consider when reviewing an opportunity to develop or move a development forward. Kicking off the economy just generally. At the 2020, we saw a 7% contraction in the market in Alberta. And currently we're forecasted at about a 5% growth for 21. So things are moving in the right way. I think that's probably going to take a little bit of time before we're back to where we want to be, but we're trending in the right direction. The unemployment rate, I think we peaked in June of 2020 at about 16% here in Alberta. And we closed out the year at 10%. And we're currently sitting at about 9%. So again, positive trend, we're moving in the right direction. Obviously, we pay attention to that metric quite closely. Rental rates. There's been a lot of great product that's been built in Edmonton in the last 2-3 years. There's a few more coming online right now or about to come online in the next couple months. It's forcing us to stay on our toes and think creatively about how we create better and different value for our tenants. I think that's a good thing, but there is a lot of options right now, which are putting a little bit of pressure on rental rates, but generally they're holding pretty stable for the moment. There's a few guys on this call, Trevor Doucette, Jason Portis, I think are on here from PCL, and Graham, which would have a lens into this also, but construction pricing is creeping up, largely driven by material pricing. At least, our current forecasting is telling us that we're kind of seeing between a 3 and 5% bump. And largely that's on wood and steel products that are driving that for the most part. Little did I didn't appreciate this, but the US right now has had the most housing starts since 2006. And I'm sure that's, largely stimulus driven, but that all plays a role in our supply chain. Finance is available. Currently, we can still secure pretty good terms with our lending partners. Operating costs, property taxes. That's probably a contentious, one for most of us. It's a challenge, and along with those varied, options that we are trying to provide for our residents, those amenities come with a cost as well. So trying to make performance work can be a bit of a challenge, but we're pivoting, we're getting creative, making it work. Lease up is taking a little bit longer. I mean, that's driven by, it's largely driven by COVID, unemployment rates. It's a little bit slower to get the building stabilized and folks in, but we're persevering. Cap rates are holding for the moment. Certain lenders are looking at the metrics a little bit differently in the sense of not looking at historicals and more focused on real current data and net of incentives. So 1 month free rent impacts the gross rent. So, but again, cap rates are holding. So what are we doing going forward? Well, generally focused on the economy. We're still looking for great neighborhoods to build in. Great neighborhoods hold their value over time. Differentiating collaborations, looking to partner with design contractors, general contractors, sub-trades, anybody that can help us bring a new, unique perspective. And that includes project delivery models. We're reducing our time to market. So if we can deliver smaller projects quicker, that de-risks our developments to a degree. And overall, we're just reducing the number of units you bring to market. So you might see some smaller developments creeping into the mix in the next couple of years. Speaking to a couple of our partners, some focus is going to be on land servicing, largely for single detached homes. That'll take place this year. Obviously, the single detached homes are going to continue. They've had a great year as of late. There's grumblings of a few large mixed-use developments that'll push ahead in 22. And I think you're going to see, a more pivot towards medium density, kind of 6 and 7 story developments, and as well, mid-sized kind of 40 unit developments also. To wrap things up, it feels like we're transitioning. We're getting, my first COVID injection is I think Friday. I'm sure there's a few folks on this call that are in my age category. It feels like we've turned a tide. I know that the numbers don't reflect that, but there's a sense of optimism in the market from the private developers' perspective. And Andrew, that's all I got. So back to you.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I had mine 2 weeks ago, so
there you go.
A little bit older, but excellent. No, thank you very much for that. That's I think you're right. I think we've got to get through probably the next 6 weeks or so, and I think we'll start to emerge the other side. And I hope there's certainly more optimism post summer, which will be good.
For sure. Agreed.
Yeah. But thanks for the update, much appreciated. So we'll move over now to the ACA AUMA team. They're going to give us an update on new energy management services for municipalities, I believe. So with that, we'll hand the floor over to them and look forward to hearing from you.
Maybe just a quick word of introduction. So before turning it over to my colleagues from AUMA, first of all, we'd like to thank Andrew, Matt, and the entire forum for the opportunity to present briefly at your meetings. In the spirit of the Owners Forum, we do have a partnership with Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, actually on a number of fronts. Before we talk energy management, you do have on your agenda, Service Alberta is presenting on prompt pay, and for the municipalities that are part of the forum, just to advise you that Alberta Urban Municipality Association, ACA, and a couple of other partners, we are looking at applying to be a nominating authority to manage adjudications for prompt pay legislation. So that is one nature of the partnership. Today, at every level of government in recent budgets and throne speeches, etc., we see a very strong public commitment to trying to tackle greenhouse gas reduction, and really pleased that our partners at Alberta Urban Municipalities Association are true leaders in that regard, and they've brought ACA in as a supporter just to help with connections and promotion. So we thank you for the opportunity for that today. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Maureen, Kyle, and Sandra. And I think Maureen's probably going to lead off to talk to you about their leadership in energy management and how that applies to municipalities and hopefully beyond municipalities. So Maureen, over to you.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. So while Kyle is sorting out how we get into full presentation mode, I'll introduce myself. My name is Maureen O'Neill, and I'm the Senior Director with the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, or as we affectionately call ourselves, the AUMA. So thank you so much to the Edmonton Construction Association and to the Alberta Construction Association for the opportunity to speak at your owners forum. Whoa, my Zoom is going nuts here. So joining me today are my colleagues Alvin Law, AUMA's Senior Director of Utilities, and Kyle Kosowski, AUMA's Director of Energy Management. And we're excited to speak to you today about our new energy management program that we've developed for Alberta municipalities and their community organizations. So before I turn it over to Kyle to take you through the program, I'll spend 2 minutes on a brief overview of AUMA. Next slide, please, Kyle, and we can still see.
Yeah, and I'm letting them take over. So we did the test and it didn't work. So Johnny's going to fix this, I think.
Okay. So if you can go to the next slide, AUMA was founded in 1905 and represents all of Alberta's municipalities where over 85% of Albertans live. So that includes all of Alberta's cities, towns, villages, summer villages, and specialized municipalities. AUMA advocates on behalf of our member municipalities on municipal issues to other orders of government. So top of mind issues right now for municipalities, in addition to the pandemic, are long-term infrastructure funding, discussions around policing in our province, and the importance of economic development. If you can go to the next slide. So in addition, AUMA has a wholly owned subsidiary, the Alberta Municipal Services Corporation, and it's through that entity that we're able to provide business services to municipalities. So these services include insurance, electricity, natural gas, employee benefits, and investment services. Through AMSC, over $250 million of revenues generated, and a portion of that modest profit will go back to fund our advocacy efforts. But today we're here to talk about our new service, energy management for municipalities. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kyle to walk you through. And Kyle, by the way, we can still see all your speaking notes. There we go. Now it works. Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Maureen. So now we're just so I don't go on to it. We're seeing the right screen, right? Maureen and Alvin?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Okay, so we're excited to tell you a little bit about this energy management program that we developed to help our municipalities harness local energy opportunities, rejuvenate and modernize their buildings, access available grants and funding opportunities, cut their operating costs, improve the user experience of buildings, and create good work in construction industry while doing good things for the planet. We surveyed our members to understand their expectations on an energy management program and to let us know, they let us know that they don't want to be sold a technology and they actually need a full solution. They need guaranteed energy performance and a trusted partner to manage implementation of energy projects for them. And foremost above all other expectations is a reduction in their operating expenses. Municipal infrastructure is aging and municipalities need to effectively replace and improve key buildings. Infrastructure such as heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, lighting, control systems, and exterior structures. So our program is designed to help organizations improve the bones of their buildings, elevate their construction projects, and future-proof their infrastructure. So think of us as trying to get them to the Starship Enterprise with their buildings. And so while lowering operating costs and rejuvenating local infrastructure is happening, there's also some global trends which are helping to drive the demand for retrofitting municipal buildings and adding renewable energy systems to communities. Businesses and organizations are setting targets to reach net zero emissions. TELUS has set a target to be net zero carbon by 2030. Enbridge's target is to eliminate all GHG emissions from its businesses on a net zero basis by 2050. City of Edmonton's goal is to be carbon neutral city and an energy sustainable city by 2050. Shell, Amazon, Budweiser, RBC, TC Energy, and hundreds more are making similar actions. People around the world are interested in owning and controlling their supply of energy. This is leading to decentralized energy generation, adoption of cogeneration, and development of community energy power plants. This project made the village of Carmangay electrically net zero. Even after this pandemic, we think the geography of work for individuals and companies will be shifting out of large cities into smaller municipalities. When we get off the screen and go outside where we live and work, will be more important than ever. So new and modernized community facilities where we gather will be important to the health and vibrancy of municipalities. The global world of finance and commerce is moving toward investment in clean technology, green energy financing, and support for businesses and regions that adopt low carbon systems. We want to help these municipalities capitalize on these opportunities. Canadian Infrastructure Bank has dedicated $2 billion to invest in large scale building retrofits. FCM with their Green Municipal Fund, that's over $1 billion, has dedicated money to retrofits, and there are other programs available. So AMA has developed an energy management program to help municipalities develop and implement renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. It's easier than ever to talk about the financial benefits of energy management, and we do that. We also recognize that these are meaningful choices for your community, for your citizens, your staff, and the future, and we'll honor that in every step we take with you. We help develop the projects from initial assessment through to funding, implementation, and ongoing monitoring and maintenance for municipalities and nonprofit organizations. AMA conducted an RFP for an implementation partner to help us deliver our energy management program. It was a lengthy RFP process of interviews and due diligence. We interviewed dozens of organizations, and ultimately we partnered with the best one, Train Technologies. This means our projects can be developed and implemented sooner, conserving energy, saving money, and completing projects within political timelines. Train is technology and brand agnostic in their recommendation of energy management systems. Each project is unique, and they deliver the most effective solution to achieve the highest standards. We've developed this program so that we assume all the risk on project performance. It's designed to be easy, scalable, and comprehensive for clients. And getting there starts with an initial opportunity assessment and preliminary audit of the buildings, facilities, and community energy needs. There's no charge for a high-level assessment of potential energy savings and generation opportunities, which our members and other nonprofit organizations love. So we'd love any questions you have. We'd love you to contact us and learn more about the program. That's all.
So thanks very much. Open it up to the floor if there are any questions for the team.
So Andrew, Ken Gibson, Alberta Construction Association, again, want to thank the Owners Forum for the opportunity for our partners at AUMA to present. If there are individual organizations participating today that would like a more in-depth presentation, I believe AUMA is more than happy to accommodate that. And I'm going to put the AUMA team a tiny bit on the spot. There is another division that is also working on the Clean Energy Incentive Program, CEAP. And I know that that's not our colleagues who are on with us right now. That I know that's not your bailiwick, but perhaps you could just signal to the group, because we do have private sector entities involved in the forum, and maybe you could just give them just a tiny bit of an overview and signal to what SEEP is all about, because that does apply to private sector buildings.
Yes, thanks, Ken. I'll take that. So pleasure meeting everybody. So the SEEP, which stands for the Clean Energy Improvement Program, is in essence a financing method for the commercial and residential building owners to actually finance energy efficiency projects through property taxes. It's a new program that was introduced through legislation several years back, as I'm sure many of you know. MCCAC and AUMA have taken on administration of this program as a result of Energy Efficiency Alberta closing down. So MCCAC is actually managing this program, and we have several pilot municipalities that have passed bylaws for us to utilize this program. So the intent of this is really to elevate construction activity. So combined between the energy management program, which Kyle talked about, as well as the Clean Energy Improvement Program, which is targeted towards commercial and residential, we really view ourselves as partners in elevating construction within Alberta. And I think the comment earlier, we do have a lot of hope that economic activity will increase, and especially given a lot of the funding announcements, which I'm sure all of you are aware of as of late.
Thanks for covering that off, and thank you, colleagues from AUMA. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Ken, and no, we appreciate you all coming to update. I think it's a really important topic, one that we're very serious about at the university. So I would encourage people to take a look, and lots of opportunities out there. So with that, moving on to our next topic, and Ken alluded to it earlier on, prompt pay. We've had discussions about this topic previously, and I'm really pleased to welcome the Service Alberta team to give us an update and take some questions. So we'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm Richard Slaughter. I'm the Executive Director of Land Health and Surveys Branch in the Service Alberta Ministry. And joining me today are Nicole List, who's going to be helping me with this short presentation on prompt payment. And Curtis Woolard is available too for any tough questions we might be getting on it. I'll begin with a quote from our Minister, the Honourable Nate Glubish, Minister of Service Alberta, who sees his government's priority as ensuring Alberta is open for business and is a safe place to invest. He sees payment disputes, whether they're big or small, put construction projects in jeopardy, and this hurts jobs, investment, and our overall provincial economy. He's committed to taking action on payment issues that are being identified in your industry. In response to this issue of delayed invoice payment in the construction industry, many of you will know the government passed Bill 37 back in November. There's also a number of statute amendments that have been introduced to the House in this spring session, and in fact, it's in second reading at this point. Service Alberta intends to bring these new rules into force by October 2021. And that's a bit of a delay to prior dates you may have heard around July. So it gives us a bit more time to be sure we get this right. The overall approach of Bill 37 was to establish the statute for addressing the delayed payment cycle in the industry and creating regulations. Regulations are intended to provide the more detailed rules for implementing prompt payment and adjudication. To gather input, Service Alberta invited subject matter experts from your industry. Many of you are in the audience today, and that started around December of 2020, and went to March 8th. March 8th, we had a semi-final meeting with the minister and many of you present that were the subject matter experts contributing to feedback on the rules and the regs we were proposing. And we're now into the next sessions of workshops, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that later, but these workshops are just being formed. Again, we're going to be looking to the industry for nominations, and these workshops will be a deeper dive into some of the aspects of the regs that we didn't quite settle in our discussions since December, but need to be able to get to drafting the regulations. And the next slide, Nicole. Yeah, so at this point, what I'll do is I'll hand the presentation over to Nicole, who will talk to you a little bit more about how the prompt payment cycle is intended to work, as well as the adjudication process when disputes do arise. Nicole?
Great. Thanks, Richard. So as Richard mentioned, this is just a basic kind of overview of how prompt payment is meant to work. So every 31 days, a contractor will issue deliver and give a proper invoice to an owner. The owner then has the 28 days to pay the contractor, and then once they receive payment, they have 7 days to pay their subs. And then the subs have 7 days to pay the subcontractors, and so forth down the line on that 7-day pay cycle. So this is, if there's no issues, the invoice is paid in full, how it is intended to work. In the legislation, it does say that the owner does have 14 days to issue a notice of non-payment to the contractor for partial or the entire part of the proper invoice. And so once that happens, a contractor has some choices where they can issue non-payments down the line as well, or they can discontinue to pay out their subs and then deal with it with the owner directly. So that kind of this is the happy path of prompt payment as long as everyone's getting paid. But of course, the second part is how adjudication would work to if there is a non-payment anywhere in the contract chain. So this is a proposed process. It will be developed more once we get into the regulations. So this will happen anytime if there is a party that has not been paid or notice of non-payment is issued and the contractor or subs want to dispute it. So it gets initiated, proposed adjudicator is named. If the adjudicator is accepted, they are appointed, and then hopefully once all the documentation is within 30 days, there is a determination or a decision, and then compliance is required by either party. There is a secondary path that if the adjudicator is not agreed upon, the nominating authority or governing body can appoint someone else to it, and then the adjudicator will accept or deny. So that's just, once again, the very basic overview of how adjudication would work if required. So moving on to some of the impacts of prompt payment. So the legislation requires a proper invoice to be given every 31 days, but we're leaving it up to contract that it can determine what day of the month, as long as it's every 31 days. As I had mentioned, the owner has 14 days to deliver a prescribed notice of non-payment to the contractor, and then the contractor can decide what to do with it after the fact. Only contractors can issue a proper invoice to the owners. And then, so on day 29, if there's been no payment, that's when interest will start accruing on the proper invoice. And one of the just changes from prompt payment from the current ability to file a lien is we're proposing that adjudication can be accessible even if there is no improvement to the land. So this allows for work that was done maybe in a design stage and something happened and there was no payment. And then also the multi-year projects will be able to utilize annual and phase holdbacks if monetary contract thresholds are met, and those are going to be parts of our regulation that will be developed, as Richard said, for October. So I'll turn it back over to Richard for the next steps.
Thank you, Nicole. So as I mentioned, the amended legislation is at second reading, and we'll be going through the House over coming weeks. Certainly still subject to Cabinet Committee review, and those are ongoing. as we move towards our intended October timeframe for having everything ready. Part of this implementation going forward will be to procure nominating authorities. As Ken mentioned earlier, he's representing a group that is showing interest, and we encourage others to consider being ready for a procurement. It'll be, early in the June timeframe is what we're anticipating, as we are just finalizing some of the criteria now in that procurement. As I mentioned earlier as well, we've had a couple of runs at regulation development with about 18 meetings since December to March 8th, with many of you and many subgroups within the construction industry. And now we're going to do, as I mentioned, a deeper dive into some of the areas that we know are still unsettled, or we haven't quite figured out how it will work. And there are areas anywhere from grandfathering to nomination authority rules on which nominating authority gets the first crack at a dispute, who gets the second crack, so things like that. So we're down into the nigglies that will then translate into the actual wording of the draft regulation and the eventual passing, reviewed by committees and passing and proclamation, hopefully sometime in October. Communications, we're certainly looking to the industry for support on this. We recognize that many associations have very involved communications organizations or units within their organization, and you're certainly a mature network in certain areas. So we would be leaning on yourselves for recommendations on how to best leverage that, and to get the message out, make sure everyone is prepared for this new regime that we believe is going to help the industry, and that all of you have been very much an important part of developing the solution. So with that, I think that's my final slide, and we're certainly open to any questions here. Cole, myself, and Curtis are prepared to do our best to respond. And if we can't, certainly we can follow up through the prompt payment email that many of you are familiar with.
Hey, Richard, I have one question if I could. My name's Roddy Hander from Hollow Block. Is there any, is the government also looking at holdback legislation and how that applies to new procurement models like IPD projects, which park a portion of the profit till key milestones? I know there's some confusion when we've entered into IPD contracts, whether or not the funds and the profit retained at each milestone can be considered part of that holdback. And I think some clarity on that issue would be really appreciated as that model becomes more prevalent.
Yes, so to respond to your question at a high level, holdbacks were definitely a part of our regulatory discussions up to March 8th, and we received a lot of input on this. It's a very important topic. Certainly, some of the ideas discussed were about minimal holdbacks of a year's time frame, and minimal thresholds. And some of the thresholds that were considered were above and below the 10 million mark. And it seemed that consensus was, although I shouldn't call it consensus, there was quite a range in what stakeholders felt the threshold should be. But I think where we landed was at the 10 million mark for projects, which we understand will keep, will basically set a number of projects completely out of that range, and because they're much smaller. And we also recognize that large pipeline projects are 50 million or more, much more. So, certainly that threshold probably isn't high enough. Again, we're trying to recognize the progressive payment of holdbacks, so that money is applied in the right places and not held back for the wrong reasons. But finding that threshold is probably been the most difficult thing. Curtis, did you are you online? Did you want to chime in on anything on holdbacks?
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah, you're coming through.
Okay, I'm gonna leave my camera off. I had a COVID vaccine shot yesterday that is not sitting well with me at all. So I'm about 14 shades of green right now. So I guess my initial comment is the holdback that we're talking about. Is it related to a builder's lien holdback, or is it related to essentially performance or quality or other issues? Because I'm not 100% sure on that.
Well,
go ahead.
I think lien legislation, I'm on the consultant side, so lien legislation certainly does apply to the work of consultants when it's, I believe, to an identifiable piece of land. And when we're working on IPD projects, there's a bit of profit, IPD being integrated project delivery, there's a bit of profit that we park in a pool that only gets released when the project is quote unquote successful, how the project defines that. And we've had situations where we've got conflicting legal opinions on whether or not that the parking of that profit layer can constitute the holdback so that the remaining funds can be distributed to the project team, or whether that holdback only applies to those, I guess, those amounts that have been accrued and crystallized in the minds of or in the rights of the team participants. So I think with these new procurement models coming forward, like IPD, where your parking project funds, it would be just nice to know whether or not that can constitute that lien holdback fund, whatever that percentage ends up being and whatever those thresholds are, because those funds are held in a sort of trust scenario in those IPD projects. Now, there's other factors that come into play that could put those funds at risk, but certainly it deserves a broader conversation than we could have here. I was just wondering if you guys are looking at those other procurement models and the fact that they are holding funds back just in a different mechanism, and whether or not that can constitute a holdback for the purposes of lien legislation.
I think I wonder if we could, if I could invite you to maybe we could take this conversation and have it, and maybe you can, I can give you my coordinates and then we can connect, because I would very much like to discuss this. We are still developing our regulations, and there might be an opportunity here for further discussion.
Certainly, Curtis.
I don't have a great answer for you right now.
No problem. I just sent you a private message with my email.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
There's I think Ken's got his hand up, and then we'll go to a question from Jesse in the chat.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew. Roddy's question is maybe a good segue. On behalf of Alberta Construction Association, I think it's important, especially when we're with a group of leaders such as the Owners Forum, to publicly acknowledge just what great collaborative partners Service Alberta have been. They have literally bent over backwards to try and accommodate the realities of the industry. So to Roddy's question, a more generic response might be that the minister and his team, as represented by Richard, have signaled a desire for subject matter experts to continue the work in partnership on not just regulations development, but the ultimate sort of rollout of prompt pay, at least in the initial years. There's going to be a lot of learning, and as developments like IPD come in, certainly from all of the communications that Alberta Construction Association has had with Richard and his team, I think there's a really strong desire to understand the complexities that the people in the forum face on a day-to-day business and to try and find solutions. So, I thank Curtis for offering to work with Roddy, but I think there's also a broader commitment from our partners in Service Alberta to hear from you guys that are experts saying, hey, what about this? Or how is that going to work in this circumstance? Everything that's happened throughout the process, ACA has been really, really pleased with how Service Alberta has tried to respond. So just wanted all of the participants of the forum to know that that's been the nature of the partnership to date, and quite confident it'll continue. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Ken. There's one in the chat I'll read out, and then Ian Morgan. So Jesse says, interested in understanding the comments about construction payment disputes, even if there was no improvement to land. Does this apply to engineers and architects, and how?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. And Ken, thank you for your compliments as well. Appreciate that recognition. Yes, certainly there is interest in including professional consulting works so that they too are covered by the prompt payment legislation, and certainly you'll find that in the amended bill that's been introduced. It takes that into context. And so to be able to provide the benefits of prompt payment to professional contracts such as engineers and architects, sometimes if they're doing design work up front, it's always unsure whether they have any remedies. If the project's never built, is it tied to a parcel that is lienable? Those are all questions that we would like to put to rest through further development of the regulations, and to ensure that engineers and architects are included. And we believe from what feedback we've received so far that they do want this, and that it would be a good thing. So the answer to that is yes, that's correct.
Thanks, Richard. So Ian Morgan from Next Architecture.
Thanks all. Just a quick question on this. With the advent of financial technology and blockchain, do you think we'd ever get to a point where you'd be paid when performed? So a subcontractor could submit a bid that outlines all the scope of work and materials. So as a for example, they've just finished all the window installs on a project. The install certified by either the architect or the general, and then the guy's paid the next day. Like, are we not sort of missing where the future's heading here?
Yes, you raise a very good point, and I definitely won't be answering it in a very high quality manner, but certainly do recognize leading and best practices, not only in technologies like blockchain, but in practices within the industry. And I would say from my position, I see the industry is really driving a lot of that. Your industry, through your own best practices and standards, and some of those standards, no doubt, are driven by this forum itself. Can certainly set the stage for what's the art of the possible, and what's the vision we should be working towards. Certainly, as executive director of land titles, I'm no stranger to the discussion or the potential of blockchain for land titles registries. We study it as well, and we're trying to get into a position to be able to test and pilot that ourselves. But again, I would look to the industry. Your issues better than we do, and so certainly your leadership would be most appreciated and expected, really. And as the minister has done here, we're willing to step in wherever we can to help. But if this is an industry vision, we really look to you to drive it.
Great. Richard, perhaps I can ask one, perhaps an elephant in the room, given a lot of the audience. Where's this going to sit with public owners?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, where are public owners in this? Where's the legislation and the regulation that affect public owners or not? Yeah,
so certainly that was a very popular question over certainly the last year or 2 years that the team and I have been working in Service Alberta. And certainly, I think long-term, there's a desire that if prompt payment solutions work, that for them to work well, it really needs to apply to all projects. And under the current legislation that's been introduced, P3s are definitely covered. But if they include a Public Works Act component to them in terms of funding or contract, that at this point is excluded. Now, that may not sound like perfect alignment because it isn't, but certainly we see Alberta Infrastructure and other departments as actually being leaders. In 2016, as most of you know, they were one of the first to introduce prompt payment procedures into their contracts for under the Public Orders Act. And at a time in 2016 when there was nothing in Alberta on prompt payment, they had something. And so that will continue. And we will, through Service Alberta, work in unison with their contract standards that implement prompt payment in a slightly different format, but nonetheless with the same objective. So for now, under the current amendments to the bill and the act, public projects are not included, but P3s and others are. So there is opportunity, I think, going forward to drive towards more integration somewhere in the future.
Excellent. Oh, thank you. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you and the team for that. I think that's a really useful discussion, which is going to continue. And obviously, you know, from the chat and what's been said, there's plenty of interest in assisting and continuing to be engaged. So thanks very much again. So with that, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we will jump across to the EY piece, Gillian and Andre at 1:58. So we'll be back sharp, please.
Okay. It is 1:58 by my clock, so I'll start to welcome everyone back. I'll introduce myself properly in a slide coming up, but we'd like to thank Andrew and the Edmonton Construction Association for having us here today. We've been given the challenge of, hey, can you come tell us a little bit about alternative delivery and help facilitate a conversation about, hey, what is it? And what challenges are there? What do we need to be thinking about together as an industry to make these delivery models work in Alberta? And so you may have seen in the chat, but I put a link to a Mentimeter website. So if you've got a mobile device handy, or you're working on multiple screens and have a second monitor, we'd encourage you to open a second browser. Either click the link or go to www.menti.com and enter the code 9490180. Or, as we're also used to in COVID times now, if anyone's been out to a restaurant at any point in time, QR code, point your phone's camera at it, and it should take you right there. And I will flash that up again, just in case there's anyone else who joins or that loses the spot before we start using it. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Andre, to introduce himself, and then I'll tell you a little about me.
Thanks very much, Jill, and good afternoon, everybody. And also thank you from my perspective to the Edmonton Construction Association for your time today. A bit of background on me. I'm a partner based in Vancouver. I've been with EY for 17 years now. So as you can probably tell from my accent, not Canadian. Spent the first 7 years of my career in Australia in our infrastructure there, and the last 10 years here in Vancouver. And lead our infrastructure advisory group in the West. There's 65 of us or so across the country, and we're primarily advising governments on the planning and implementation of major capital projects. And I've practiced here over the last 10 years, during a market that was, very buoyant from the perspective of alternative delivery models, particularly in the P3, of the P3 variety. Worked on a number of projects across sectors here in BC, also a lot of projects in the Northwest Territories with some unique conditions up there. But more recently, through the transition, I guess, in the industry that's been afoot, and through some of the issues that Jill's going to talk to later, have been working more with clients around other alternative delivery models beyond P3s, which we'll spend some time talking about today. So with that, I'll pass it back to Jill.
Thanks, Andre. So as Andre said, my name's Gillian Beaton. I'm here in Alberta, based in Calgary, and report into the Andre through the Vancouver office. But you might be sitting there saying, hey, I've just barely wrapped my head around P3s, never mind done one, and you want to talk to me about something that goes beyond P3s. Well, if that's you, that's me too. I don't have the sage experience that Andre's had on some of the newer emerging models yet, but I happen to live in a household where my significant other is a practitioner of IPD projects. And so I'm a little bit embarrassed to say the topics of emerging delivery models and how we can be better together is a dinner conversation that happens around here. The other disclaimer I have to put up today is Andre and I are here today in a capacity that's completely separate from some of the ongoing work that our colleagues have with the government of Alberta around alternative delivery and procurement. So if you're talking to them, or if you're a member of the government of Alberta and you are talking to some of our colleagues, we're ring fenced away from them. Nothing you say or ask questions about today will make it back to them for better or for worse. So with that, I've prefaced some of this, but we're going to go through why we're talking about alternative delivery and what alternative models are out there and what challenges they're trying to solve. And then we'll send you into breakout sessions and ask you a question to help us with some problem solving. We've got a great diverse audience here that bring different perspectives. We're just going to crowdsource some brainstorming to leave with Matt and the Edmonton Construction Association around what next. So with that, I am going to send you into the Menti for the first time and get you warmed up. So our first Menti question that you should see coming up on your screens in about 10 seconds is, which delivery models have you had experiences with? So are you still back in the design, bid, build? Is that the comfort spot? Have you done construction management in one of its forms? Have you tackled one of the P3s? Are you already in and maybe one of our veterans of IPD and alliancing? Or you can hit the other box. And what I'll do, I will throw that up on screen and we'll have a look at who's here in the audience today and what types of experiences we bring collectively. 16, 17, so I'll wait till this ticks up, but an interesting trend, and we ordered them from left to right based on how long they've been along, or not along, but how common they are. So kind of moving from traditional, we got into the P3s, and then at the far right-hand side of the screen, we dropped the IPD and some of the other emerging ones. I'd be interested, I saw the note for the Menti code 9490180. If you scroll up in the chat, I think I dropped the link in that'll take you right there. But what you see is a general fall off of our experiences as a collective group. A lot of DBB and DB 25, 23. By the time we make it over to IPD, we're looking at 12. So half of the experiences we've got on the other side. What I was gonna say is if you were one of the three people that put in other, I'd be interested if you drop in the chat for us what those other models were. And so with that as a bit of a frame for today's session, I'm going to send us back into the slides and say, hey, why are we talking about alternative delivery for major capital projects? And hey, most of the last 10 years have been dominated by a discussion of P3s as alternative delivery. And so even right now, we've got 291 active P3 projects worth $140 billion in the market across Canada. And hey, that model's been successful in delivering projects for the last 20 years. There's efficient procurement processes, there's standardization, there's been a relatively standard pipeline or steady pipeline when you look nationally. There's availability of debt and equity financing. The banks and the wider parts of the network understand that model. And up to a point, we had some comfort with the risk profile. Here in Alberta, we've done schools, ring roads, a bus barn here in Calgary, an LRT up in Edmonton, composting facilities, wastewater facilities. A lot of different asset classes used the P3 model. But a domino has fallen, as we say. And there are different conversations happening now about how we share risk and think about delivering projects in a way that adds value. So I might ask, I'm going to send you back into the Menti again, and this one, you won't be multiple choice, it's free answer. But I'll say, what types of issues have you seen arise on projects that might be contributing to the changing market environment? So if you're an owner, what are some of the challenges you've had? Have you had scope creep? If you're on the private side where you've been out building something, have you run into risks and encountered challenges with those risks? I'll get everyone to give some ideas. And again, as they start to trickle in here, I will show the group what's coming in. Intellectual property issues is an interesting one. Scope creep, permitting, unknown conditions, aggressive risk transfer. Scope creep seems to be really big. That's a popular one. Claims, yeah, claims is something very combative. Oh, unknown conditions is getting bigger. People might be voting that one up, but there's lots of themes here around allocation of risk transfer and leading to disputes, unrealistic scope, and all of those things are the issues we're seeing arise that have started this conversation about, hey, what's next? So I'll leave that open if people want to continue to put some ideas into that word cloud. We'll give it to Matt at the end in case they want to distribute it. But the next piece is, hey, it's not all been smooth sailing, as we all evidenced in our word cloud. So you look at what's happened. Crillion's collapse left Canadian projects in limbo. AECOM and SNC-Lavalin have withdrawn participation in P3s or fundamentally changed the way they think about participating, and that made headlines. And then right here in Alberta, we've got a few issues on our rig roads, both with the maintainability in the Northeast Calgary, delays on a different project, and then the Valley Line in Edmonton that's trending late. And some of us might be on some of those projects and living those pains. And it's not to say that they never work, but there's enough here that we're having this conversation. Risk allocation may be broken on fixed price contracts, and conventional delivery models, the stuff we've got in our toolbox, might not be enough to address some of the issues that we all identified there. So with that, sending you back to the Menti again and asking you the question, what alternative delivery models for major projects have you heard the most buzz about lately? When you hear people talking out in industry, is it moving from a DBB to a design build? Maybe if you're a smaller municipality, or are cities, owners, people out in private industry, contractors, hearing more and more about stuff like IPD and alliancing? I'm going to come over here, and I think earlier in our conversation today, even as we were talking about prompt payment, our leader here was even featured in that conversation. So recognizing the labels are quite small on this one, the big orange bar there is the IPD and the alliance contracts. So delivery partner, one person's hearing about that one. Over here with the 6, collaborative, progressive, hybrid, some sort of new P3 is showing up. A little bit of construction management at risk, and then progressive design build. I know that's one I've been hearing about a lot lately, and in conversations with some of you as we market sound projects. So strong leader in the IPD, followed by progressive design build. And I think that's a pretty good segue into some of what Andre is going to cover next.
Thanks, Jill. So I think the theme is the market's really gravitating towards greater collaboration in contracting, and the term collaborative contracting is kind of entered the nomenclature and is part of that buzz. And you know, some will argue that, and I think it's reality, that there is collaboration on some of our existing models, no doubt, particularly around the Canadian P3 model. It's got a lot of collaboration built into the RFP process as part of the structure of that process, and driving innovation across the bidding teams as part of that. But the collaborative contracting that we're referring to and that the buzz is about is where that's really amplified. The collaboration is built into the contract, it's built into the culture and the process, and it's really a new way of going about delivering projects. And some core components of these collaborative models are early contractor involvement is a real foundation in terms of getting the contractor involved a lot earlier than they otherwise would have if it were a competitive design build process where you would need to develop your specification to a greater degree and facilitate that procurement process. Or in the case of design bid build, obviously develop the design before you tender construction. With early involvement, you're really facilitating contractor input on buildability of the proposed design, making more informed design decisions earlier with the benefit of having cost information available from that contractor, which can make that process a lot more effective than if you didn't have that. And then what goes hand in hand with that to a degree is, and because you can't have your cake and eat it too, is open book costing and a transparent cost development as opposed to a competitive hard bid, because the very nature of the process is you're helping to define, or you're working to define the scope that's not yet defined. You're working through de-risking a project and working to get to a point where you can more efficiently price it. So these models tend to have or not have a competitive hard bid process and be based more on an open book build up of cost estimate. To some degree, you can fix prices and other financial parameters up front, but you're not necessarily going to be able to do that with quantities. So so that's another key element. And also part of that is because you're not evaluating on the basis of a fixed price, you're selecting contractors more on the basis of qualifications, on expertise, capability, capacity, to address some of the key project challenges, and also to work in a collaborative context, experience doing that. And that what that process contributes to also is reducing bid costs, because that's been one of the key drivers of design build competitive processes becoming less desirable is the significant cost to bid some of these deals in the context of a market that's heating up. This can be a more efficient, effective way to kind of drive interest in projects. Next slide, please, Jill. So this chart here, and I'll preface this with, we certainly haven't covered the full spectrum here, but we wanted to summarize a few of the key models that we're hearing the most buzz about, and obviously IPD's on the list, as we saw from the Menti, but also, so we've got two categories that we wanted to cover. On the left side of this chart is two-stage contracting, and so from bottom to top, it's the degree of collaboration, and from left to right is the degree of risk transfer to the contractor. So you see DBB and DB there, and from that perspective, the collaborative models, construction manager at risk and progressive design build, are examples of two-stage contracting. And they can be aligned to DBB and DB from the perspective of on construction manager at risk, you still have the designer the owner having a separate designer and developing the design to 100%, and on the progressive design build side, you're still ultimately looking to transfer design and build risks to the contractor. What's really differentiating these options and what's making them collaborative, though, is a two-stage process where you're having the contractor involved early during a pre-construction or an early phase services stage, where they work collaboratively with an owner, fee-for-service basis or a consulting kind of basis, to inform the design, to develop the specification, and eventually get to a point where you do transition into a construction contract or a design build contract. But because you've collaborated in advance, that proposal or that deal you ultimately signed up to is optimized. So that's one category. On the other side, IPD and alliances is a real paradigm shift. We're not talking about risk allocation there, about risk sharing. It's a multi or a poly-party agreement. You know, key project participants are all essentially at the table together. And you know, they've got strong incentives through that process and through the compensation structure to work together to ultimately achieve overarching project goals, and to achieve a better actual cost than what was targeted, and to collaborate strongly in doing so. So to each of these in a bit more detail on the next slide. You'll recognize this construction management at risk, and I apologize for those who are well versed in these, so we'll cover this relatively quickly. But you'll see on top the general structure under CMAR, a separate contract with a designer and a construction contractor. The unique part, as you see there, is the pre-construction services during design development. That's the time when that contractor is providing constructability input, working to help de-risk the project for construction. And driving value such that when you get to an ultimate construction contract, it's more efficient. And the intent is to ultimately transition that contractor involved during pre-construction into a delivery contract or a construction contract, but it's not an obligation. You know, hopefully if expectations are aligned and that open book process unfolds as it's supposed to, that would be a natural transition, but there's always the option for the owner to take an off ramp and re-tender the project if things don't work out. And the real benefit is the reduced risk of change orders when you get to construction, just because of the involvement of that contractor earlier on. So that can be a real value add under that model. Similarly, progressive design build have that early stage collaboration before we get to the signing of a design build agreement. An owner's advisor would work with the owner to develop the design definition, some early stage parameters for design, and then you would appoint the progressive or the design builder. You know, there's no prescribed time as to when you do it, but the contractors would likely suggest that the earlier the better, to really help inform some design decision making before those decisions have been made, with the benefit of having the open book costing there to kind of complement the decisions and the other inputs being made from the team to make effective decisions and optimize the scope and ultimately the price. And then with IPD and alliancing on the next slide, as we said, it's a real paradigm shift. A multi-party agreement with the owner in the same arrangement with the architect, designer, the contractor, engineers and subs, and they're all working together as part of a organization. There's joint decision making. Many decisions need to be unanimous. You know, there's an overarching culture of no, which really is one of the key ingredients to unleashing innovation is you know, not being worried about, you know, achieving or doing the minimum to meet your specification because you're worried about cost overruns, or not you know, worried about being, you know, having legal action brought upon you by you fellow participants. This is all intended to be, you know, everybody working together at the table, shooting for the same goal. And all the way through the process, continuous involvement of all participants through design and then through construction. What really binds everybody together ultimately is the compensation framework. So we touched on this a bit earlier, but really in IPDs and alliances, you could describe the compensation structure as involving three key limbs. The first of which is the direct costs of the project and the project-specific overheads. All participants are paid for their project-specific costs, so they're never going to lose. You know, they'll at least get their costs back. The second limb is corporate overhead and normal profit. That's otherwise known as the fee. That part is potentially at risk. Hopefully not, but so any downside would be capped at that. And the third limb is the incentive compensation layer, as it's referred to in an IPD, pain share, gain share mechanism, where ultimate outcomes of the project, the actual outturn cost, for example, relative to the target that's been established collaboratively, is measured, and the impacts of that, the gain or the pain, is shared across the participants. So that's what really that working towards optimizing the project, the design, the implementation to achieve value is that's shared across the team is really the core ingredient of the model that can drive real innovation. Next slide, Jill. So that's the theoretical 101. I think what we thought might be useful for the group is to identify some projects across the country that have harnessed these these various models. So, for example, the Union Station Enhancement Project in Ontario, which is, I think, the first project officially using the Alliance, the Alliance framework, taken from Australia and also used in the UK. That project, it was initially planned to be a design build finance, but there were some key risks in that project that weren't really conducive to a competitive hard bid process. I mean, it's a 100-plus-year-old building, a lot of pre-existing unknown conditions that are difficult or impossible to price effectively in a way that drives value. A lot of stakeholder complexities, including interfacing with the city and the province, permitting challenges, geotechnical, you name it. So that project, the alliancing model, was chosen there for the flexibility that it provides in, in working through new and changing project risks collectively as a group. That's currently in process. The Cowichan District Hospital Replacement Project in BC is the West's first attempt at alliancing, and again, taking the competitive alliance model this time from Australia, very similar, and it's just that the target outturn cost development in the beginning, basically the benchmark that the team will be measured against and compensated against, is established competitively initially through a project development phase. And then ultimately a single team will be selected and work through the remainder of the process. And as many of you would know, in BC, historically, a lot of the projects were delivered as P3s in the hospital space. That transitioned a couple of years ago more to design build finance. But even that model has seen waning interest from the private sector for a number of reasons covered by Jill, bid costs as well being one of them. And the additional factor in this project was the imposition of the community benefits. Effectively means that the contractors on that project need to use external labour, which is managed by a Crown corporation, which ensures that underrepresented groups participate in the project, but it adds a layer of risk and complexity that I think the alliance model is one way to solve. We mentioned there the Stuart Lake and Caribou. They're examples of progressive design builds that are also being implemented for some smaller BC in the $100 to $300 million range in interior of BC. That's more driven by market interest, bidding costs, and trying to drive more competition, because we did see one project in particular in Vancouver that only had one bidder, which is what was the catalyst for transition paradigm. And then the last one on the list there, Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, is just probably the largest IPD I think I know of here in Canada, range of 4. A lot of challenges on that one in terms of numerous facilities within a campus, lots of stakeholders needs to manage together, and also a budget obviously that needs to be kept in mind. And so there are a number of drivers there for choosing an innovation-led approach like IPD. Jill, did you want to cover some other examples in Alberta?
Yeah, thanks, Andre. So it's not just Canada doing it, we're doing it here too. And I know that this isn't a comprehensive list. There's probably other people that could throw some more for me in the chat. But the Bonnybrook wastewater treatment plant had schedule constraints and interfaces with the existing plant. It was an expansion project, and they chose to go construction management at risk. Lloydminster, for their wastewater treatment plant, made a different choice, but the idea that they wanted the budget protected, they wanted interfaces with the existing plant, and then they were looking for innovation. There were some real complexities around integration and interfaces, so they chose to go IPD and share those collectively and bring in that consensus decision making about how to solve those problems. And then IPD has been used on a number of schools in both Edmonton and Red Deer. And again, that's seeking collaboration to drive development of innovative spaces for those schools and achieve some of the long-term sustainability targets, but also fit within some of the budget constraints. And I think there are some really great success stories about IPD in particular that came out of Red Deer, where I think as the legend goes, they actually had so much budget left over, they achieved their profit pool and they got to hand some money back to the funding partners. And I've at least heard it was kind of like, well, what do I do with this? That doesn't happen very often. But a great demonstration of what that model can do for projects. So with that said, what are some of the challenges? Let's shift and say, okay, if there's a lot of pros about why we do this, why isn't everyone doing it? And I'm going to give you a little food for thought, because we are going to send you into those breakout rooms and ask you to brainstorm a little bit about solutions. But 3 things that are perceived buckets of challenges are: 1, owner readiness. So there's always that fear of the unknown and the resistance to change. There can be a lack of cultural alignment there and a misalignment in governance structures. So if you put yourself in the shoes of an owner and you go up to council or exec committee and you get approval for a P3 and you have your scope document written and you say, here's what you're buying, give me the budget. That doesn't work so well in the collaborative models. It's different. You need that paradigm shift that says, hey, as an owner, I'm actually walking to you with a target outturn cost. We might have to do some problem solving and trust me to go do that. That's a different conversation with some of our political leaders than they're used to. Second one is around demonstrating value. Another area where, hey, we're using taxpayer funds on some of these projects. And how do I go back to the taxpayers and justify that I got the best value possible? It's really easy when I shouldn't say it's easy, it's accepted talk track when you go back and say, I asked for a bunch of bids and I picked the lowest one. There's value there because they're doing the same work for less money. It's a more complex and nuanced conversation to go there and make a justification around value, around something like implementing a community benefits framework, like Andre talked about at the Cowichan hospitals. The way that we talk about value, how you bring value in managing risk, that needs to shift. But how do we do that? And then the last kind of seed I'll plant is that lack of clarity in the contract model. And I actually saw someone put in the chat the reference to CCDC 30, I think. But there is, as we develop our Canadian version of some of these models, well, IPD is maybe a little bit ahead of the game. There's lots of variations. There's IPD Light in the US. We're now bringing in parts of the Alliance contracts from Australia, a little bit of the UK flavor in here, such that we're not consistent. And that drives complexity when you try and jump from project to project, or you have expectations around what something is or isn't. So with a few of those little breadcrumbs, I'm going to throw up on screen our instructions for the breakout. You're going to have 10 minutes. We're going to say we've introduced those 3 general categories of challenges, and I'm actually going to switch the screen for you on the Menti so that if you're following along on a second screen, you'll get the question up there. You've been allocated to a breakout room. A link will appear on your screen. My understanding is you have to click it to head there. We said, please nominate 1 spokesperson in your breakout room. I'm going to put the onus on the person whose first name appears earliest in the alphabet to make sure you have a spokesperson, whether it's you or you cold call one of your fellow breakout people. Go away, bring your perspectives, and then we'll ask that person that was nominated as a spokesperson heads into Menti and puts your group's top 2 ideas back into the Menti for us. With that, I will ask Matt and team to send us to our breakout rooms. Okay, I'm starting to see some groups returning here. What I've put on screen is what you've come up with. We'll scroll through a few of these. I'm going to go here. One of our teams gave us, hey, in demonstrating value, open book needs to be real open book and supported by well-organized documentation. That's an interesting one. I think we've all heard stories of preparing bids or preparing quotes or other things, and you've got the real books, and then you've got what the client sees. And from an owner's perspective, hey, if we're gonna be collaborative and we're gonna talk to the public and our politicians about doing this, there's probably a system element and then there's a behavioral element. So it's interesting the group added here by well-supported or well-organized documentation. Maybe a systems component about how we file things, the use of cloud technology, all of that good stuff, and lifting everyone, all the trades and everything up so that works for all of us.
One thing I might just, Jill, sorry, is
yeah.
in the Alliance projects here in BC, particularly Cowichan, and they're adopting a financial auditor, and there's a real process. That scope was all about establishing up front with everybody in the contract to begin with, and the procurement documentation, what the various cost categories were, making sure there was clarity, and then seeking submissions from proponents, working with individual proponents around what their cost base is and making sure we're aligned in terms of what tier certain costs fit into, and then also doing retrospective audits once invoices come in and making sure they're aligned with that. So I think there is definitely some progress being made on that front.
I was going to go to this one next. Number one, lack of knowledge on the owner side, familiarity with what the process really is, and flexibility given some of the procurement structures and decision making. Yeah, I think that's right. It's a challenge. There is that lack of familiarity, and there's only so many people in our province right now that have lived one of these. So trying to attract those people, they might find themselves in high demand over the next little while. But how do we bring them in so they can be part of that voice and advocacy? And how do we make sure the experience, those who have lived experiences are getting to share those? So a great plug for the Edmonton Construction Association that maybe there's some follow-up to do there to bring voice to some of these others. And then finding the right sweet spot for a project size and type and deal with the risk transference mentality. I think, Andre, the sweet spot, that's going to go right to what you were telling me about earlier. Do you maybe want to share some of that with the group?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the challenges is that, you know, alliances or IPD, for example, is best applied to a project that has a high degree of complexity, and often that brings scale, you know, interfaces and things, which conflicts with the fact that you'd like to start small and try it on a little, you know, on a pilot project, for example. And so I've certainly worked with clients who are interested in the paradigm, but also don't want to try something completely new on one of their biggest projects. So I think that there's going to need to be some increasing momentum and finding the right sweet spot for firstly a pilot to kind of get that paradigm shifted internally and some momentum, and then obviously starting to use it more often.
I'm also going to blow this one up here for a moment. How do we embrace a change in mindset away from equating the best value with cheap? And I think that goes right to the heart of it. And then a question there, what are the best types of projects to try and improve new models? And that directly relates to some of what Andre was just saying is we got to find the right ones. This one, demonstrating value, was a challenge for 3 of 4 participants in a certain group, subjected to legislation and trade agreements. That procurement threshold, call it $75,000, call it $99,000, wherever it's set, trying to talk about doing a qualifications selection can be really challenging on the owner side. And it comes back to that change in the mindset. So again, we have to get better about talking about the benefits and value and the way that the contracting model still provides protection and value for the owner. This one, education, speaks to solving the owner readiness challenge, which that group identified with. In addition, independent cost analysis. Oh, someone set the ball on the tee there for Andre. Brought some BC input there. Peer reviews, and peer reviews can help overcome that value demonstration challenge. So that's an interesting one for owners to take away from today's discussion. The idea of what other roles or pieces of the puzzle can you fit together to help you with that. And so with that, and looking at time, there's lots of good ideas here. And I think if you exit the Menti, there's actually an option to email yourself these ideas and the results of the polls today. So feel free to make use of that. What I'll put up, and I'll hand it over to Andre, is kind of the 3 things we wanted to leave you with as a tag team.
Thanks, Jill. It says 2 and there's 3. I think certainly these models aren't the panacea, and we say that about any model. I think ultimately it's a tool in the toolkit, and we do want to emphasize that traditional or competitive hard bid models will continue to have their place, and particularly on projects where you can define scope readily, maybe don't have some of the risk of changes or some of the unknown conditions, etc. It wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to embark on the journey on those kinds of projects. So we do need to find the right projects of the right nature and also scale, I think, to start building momentum. I think once you have made the decision to pursue it, obviously commitment is important. And I think the success of these models, what we hear time and time again from the market, both on the contractor side and the owner side, is you really need to fully embrace it. And that would include steps like what's being taken in BC in terms of a dedicated facilitator with deep experience, not really doing anything other than facilitating the process and making sure everybody is collaborating properly and is really aligning around commercially, technically around the vision and the key project objectives. So that's a key one. And then tailor your process, obviously, to in your commercial framework to drive value, doing some of the things we talked about around cost validation, etc., but also around your evaluation framework, around how you choose your team. You can actually get some degree of cost certainty up front. You might not get a fixed. There are strategies to try and to get some degree of certainty or clarity of costing in the beginning, and then finally, set the right expectations. I think it's all about getting that vision right, making sure the owner and contractor from the beginning are aligned in terms of, what the budget or what the vision is around that budget envelope, and then what's desired for that amount, and trying to iron out any discrepancies there or any nobody really wants to use them. That they're not, like that. It's just not a position you want to be in. So I think they're the 3 key takeaways. But certainly something that we're seeing grow across the country, and I think definitely have their place. And I think the more that owners and adopt these and start building that momentum, I think that'll really be a catalyst across the country. So from me, that's all. Thanks very much for your time, for listening. And then I think one last comment we have there on that last slide, my apologies, is another leave behind and a takeaway. I mean, there is a lot of good material available. From an IPD perspective, the Integrated Project Delivery Alliance, IPDA, has a wealth of information on their database, on their website. from frameworks to templates to guidance material, education material. I would highly recommend exploring that. CCDC we mentioned earlier, they do have an IPDA template of sorts. It's still being developed, and there are elements from the Alliance framework that's still needs to converge there to a degree, depending on what projects you're applying it to. Design Build Institute of America, the Wastewater Design Build Council have some great materials available. And then obviously connecting with owners and contractors, being interconnected as an industry, I think is important, and harnessing some of the lessons learned on any given project for the next one, I think is very important. So that's it from me. Thanks very much.
I think with that, we hand it back over to Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Gillian. Spot on time. Very much appreciated. So we've covered a lot of topics today. I think they've been some excellent discussion. Really a huge thank you to Gillian and Andre from Ernst & Young for being willing to come and tackle this topic, because I know it's not an easy one, given we do have some government folks on the meeting, but I think a really important one. I think it's something we do need to come back to. I think a big takeaway, when we're talking about cost or price, we have to move more away from the Alberta way. How can we get the biggest, cheapest space? Rather than looking at total cost of ownership and really rethinking the outcome that we want to collaborate to achieve. So really useful. Thank you both. I look forward to having a look at some of the Menti comments again, and we will definitely come back to it. So with that, we're coming to the end of today's meeting. I think we will put out a bit of a survey from today, but also to try and gather whether there's any interest in probably coming together remotely in the summer, and then our regular meeting in the fall sometime around October. Hopefully we'll be able to have one of those in-person meetings that very few of us have had for many, many months now. And that's what we'll hope to get to if it's safe and if public health restrictions allow. So we'll put that out. And I would ask that you do add what sort of topics would you like to discuss at the next meeting. You saw the range we put together today. We still need to pick up on some of the pieces that we were talking about in the spring of last year, just as COVID hit. Things like we were talking about risk, which I still think is a very relevant topic, even more so probably at the moment. And we were also talking about BIM and how we look at projects that way. So please do come back with some thoughts so that we can move forward and build an agenda with the leadership group that will support us either the summer, the fall, or both. So I also really want to put a big thank you to Matt. He has really kept us going and has done a lot of the legwork to pull together today. So thanks to Matt and Johnny for the technical side. And I appreciate your time, the 2 hours. I know it's valuable at the moment, but thank you all for contributing and joining us today. So thanks again, and look forward to catching up with you in due course.